pleasure to continue joining these in these activities with you. I of course feel that this has been a really interesting week for us. We've had many sessions, both about our projects as well as sessions that I'm sure will be helpful for you in your chapters in order to have a better internal governance, to have better processes for us to deal with volunteering environments that we have every day. First, I want to remind you that we do have a summary for the sessions of yesterday and the previous days in SoundCloud. You can find that on our Twitter account, ISOC_lag. You have 4 or 5 minute sound bites there. Please do remember to choose the language of your preference because we have simultaneous interpretation right now. You can select the language that you want to listen to, either Spanish or English. You can see over there the instructions by Son Limit, our interpreter. And today we will be talking about routing security. We've talked about many of our Internet Society projects. We have been talking about on Tuesday, actually, we spoke about the creation of technical spaces for collaboration, and they're one of the projects that actually came up in conversation were the MANRS projects, those norms that we have for routing security. And today we are joined by a couple of brilliant colleagues. But before I give the floor to them, I want to talk about routing security. First of all, we need to consider that internet is made up of about 70,000 autonomous systems. They connect voluntarily to interact, exchange traffic, exchange information. They use specific numbers. They are called the ASNs, or autonomous system numbers. They use a protocol, the BGP protocol, in order to exchange information about how to reach each other. So that is the way in which information packets are traveling throughout the internet. They do that through routes that are defined by BGP. And each autonomous system has edge servers that map out the scope of the network, that indicate where they can reach based on the IP blocks that have been awarded to them. Using all that information, routing tables are created, including all the routes for each network. And one of the main aspects is that this BGP protocol is exclusively based in the trust among networks. This is good and bad. This is good because it enabled the internet to develop in the way that it did and become this transformative technology that we know today. But at the same time, it created a front that we need to deal with together, because more and more we find routing incidents happening, and these incidents are common ways in order to attack networks. Some of the routing incidents that we know can be filterings, spoofings, hijackings, and they lead to multiple issues such as data theft and all the way to damages to the image of an organization. And the big issue is that many of these mistakes and incidents go unnoticed. But it is possible that these incidents might actually put full services or full regions offline. Sometimes we have hijackings, then we have leaks and IP address spoofings. Now, some of the incidents don't make the news as hijacks, and some do. But what we've seen, for example, a case where a Pakistan ISP turned YouTube offline, or how some DOS attacks, for example, have had an impact on user experience. And in order to hear more about these kinds of incidents that happen on the internet and that connect to routing incidents, we have Augusto Maturin. Augusto worked with a Ford project a project that focuses not just on monitoring routing incidents, but also he developed an RPKI validator. He also participates in the Fellows MANRS program as well, and he is part of the research project of the Fellows MANRS. So, Augusto, if you are ready to present, you have the floor, and thank you for being here with us. No, thank you, Israel. Can everyone hear me? Yes, we can. Brilliant. Okay, let me go to my second test. I need to share my screen with you, so give me a second. Okay, can you see the screen? Yes, we can. Brilliant. Okay, just a second. I'm gonna close all the Zoom windows that I can see here. Okay, so that was a great introduction, Israel. So going in that line, I want to talk about what we mean when we talk about routing or internet routing. Many a times, and generally, when we talk about manners, people think that this is a very technical issue. So they say, okay, this is an issue for the technical community, so people leave it aside. But it's interesting that anyone who wants to be an internet leader and align with the vision of internet society need to pay more attention to routing. So I wanted to explain why it is important to talk about routing and routing security. And here in this image that I prepared with a collage, if you will, of other images, I do start over here with the three layers of the internet. I took this from the infrastructure chapter that is the Introduction to Internet Governance by Jordan Govalija. And I think it helps us see the infrastructure. So we all have those layers there, but above the layer of infrastructure, we have people, because that those layers are used by people who actually connect to the internet and develop the internet. And routing, of course, is in the infrastructure layer, in the transport layer. And here we have the three main internet systems over here. The one that pretty much know the most is the domain name system. People know that if we go into any website such as manners.org or ISOC.org, we know that that domain is translated into an IP address, and that is the address that has been assigned to the web server that we will be accessing. Then we have the addressing architecture. That is how we distribute those IPs to all devices. So be that your computer, your cell phone. I have a computer in my I have an IP in my computer, I have one in my cell phone. Zoom servers have their own IP addresses as well, so that has to do with how all those devices that connect to the internet have an address. And then the third place to discuss or consider is the routing system. So now, once we have all those devices with IP addresses, we need to create routes between those devices so that any of the hundreds of thousands, millions of devices that are connected can reach other devices. So a full system, a full routing system is created based on a protocol called the BGP protocol. But what happens is that the more we have more people connecting to the net, this BGP protocol does not actually consider security. So we have a lot of people connected and no real system that ensures that security. So those routes become more vulnerable. And because our lives are becoming more and more vulnerable, and even so in this year with 2020, where our social lives and our work is being carried out through the digital world, the interest in affecting and having malicious intent and carrying out malicious actions in the internet grow, of course. And so, what you would imagine is that any stakeholder who wants to have an impact on cybersecurity, out of all of these components, they can use whatever they want to actually carry out their attack. So we generally know attacks on people, what has to do with social engineering, or those attacks that go after apps, So if we find a mistake in an OS, or a bug somewhere, in order to conduct surveillance, imagine. And then we, of course, know that there are attacks on hardware devices, equipment, or over the spectrum as well. But we don't really talk about the fact that in the transport layer, there can be attacks in routing that will allow those malicious third parties to carry out their malicious activities affecting our security. So I don't want to be too technical about this because I don't want to bore you, but I do want to explain a bit about what routing incidents are and how attackers can actually go against this layer. And do remember that many of the incidents are not carried out on purpose. Many a times they are the result of mistakes committed by operators, because in the end they are human and the operation is complex. So I mean, they can make a mistake, and the servers can malfunction, and that can have an impact on end users. So now I will very briefly go into different routing incidents, and if you want me to go more in depth, I can later on. Here, for example, we have a cell phone with an IP 10.0.0.1. I want to connect to an app, a messaging server service to the server, and the app messaging server is 200.0.0.1, and there is a cloud of the internet that will connect my messages to the app. But because we know uh, internet is a network of networks, so in order for my cell phone to reach the servers of that app that I want to use, we'll go through a series of autonomous systems, which are the network operators, and they all have their own networks, and that is how the network of network is created. Here we only have three jumps. This is quite simple. So one could be my ISP, then we have a transit provider for me and for the messaging server, and that is creating a route that would enable all the packets that I am sending to get to the server and then go back to me. So the first incident that we could have, which is very basic, is a hijacking, a route hijacking. And what happens is that there is this fraudulent autonomous system that impersonates another network. They pose an announcement with a set of IP addresses that do not correspond to that system, but somehow they manage to get that route announcement to be dispersed throughout the network in order for other systems to consider it authentic. So then traffic is redirected to that malicious autonomous system. And then the other incident, which I think is a bit more complex to understand, is a route leak. And it has an RFC specification even, but basically it implies that when the announcement of a routing announcement goes over its desired scope. So our ISP will probably not be connected to one transit provider. They will be connected to several of them in order for the insurance of internet resilience. But that doesn't mean that our ISP is not supposed to connect to big providers. They connect to us end users. But what happens is that a lot of the times a route that comes from one transit provider is announced to another transit provider. So our provider ends up becoming a transit provider as well. And so a lot of massive traffic is going for that provider and to that provider, and they cannot actually support that. So that's basically what happens. That's what happens when an autonomous system receives a route and they announce that route when they're not supposed to do it. And that can happen by mistake, but sometimes it happens because of malicious intent. Now, I don't want to go in depth into this, into these two cases, but those are the routing incidents. Like I said, One are the routing hijacks, and the others are route leaks. And now the question would be, how can this affect us as end users, right? What can happen to us through these routing incidents that might affect us as users? So here, what I'm showing in the cases is this is a normal flow. So this is a normal data flow, and as an end user over here, I can send my messages to the cloud service, going through the intermediary routes that are correct, and no incidents happen. But sometimes uh, traffic can be rerouted, as I see over here on the top right. And what happens here is there is an autonomous system that is announcing that they have a route, and they might be able to get all data transmitted to that autonomous system, and then they did redirect it to the final system. So they won't actually create any blocks, but they will be able to inspect traffic though, or they might degrade the service. So what they do is they become man in the middle, if you will, uh, and they are getting all the transit. This can be done either through a leak or a hijack. Another thing that the autonomous system can do if they achieve that redirection is not to continue redirecting the traffic to that final destination. They simply send it to what would be a black hole and they rule it out. So in this case, they're blocking the service. Every person that wants to access that cloud service cannot do it because that autonomous malicious system is blocking it. And then the last possibility could be an IP address spoofing. And what they're doing there is they are acting as if they were that server. And then that could lead to bigger issues, of course. Now let's see a couple of examples of this. Here you see a timeline with some of the most significant incidents that made the news. Of course, these are not all the incidents that have made the news, and they started way before 2008. But I think the case where the Pakistani government censored YouTube, which is what Israel mentioned, I think is one of the most emblematic cases. It took place in 2008, and what should be clear here is that Pakistan didn't want to censor YouTube for everyone. They wanted to do that just in their country. And the way that they did this was by using an ISP. It is a public ISP, and they provide services for all Pakistani users. And what happens was that all the traffic that should have been going to YouTube was ruled out and went to a black hole. But what happened was that that ISP was connected to transit providers that connected the ISP to the world in order to have access to the internet. So what happened, because of a configuration mistake, there was a route leak of those routes that were being sent to a black hole, and that connected to the entirety of the internet. So all the routes that were going throughout the world to YouTube ended up leading somewhere that was the autonomous system of Telecom Pakistan. And apart from sending all the traffic to the black hole, Pakistan Telecom ended up having too much traffic, and so all users lost access to the internet as well. So this was, let's say, a connection between bad intentions and an unintended consequence. Because, as a matter of fact, more users than were intended ended up not having access to YouTube. And here, this is a case of blocking. Another case that was really well known. This is 2018, over 10 years after that, was caused by a group of Russian hackers who were able to create a fraud, and they were able to steal over $160,000 in cryptocurrency. And here you can see how an attacker can use several tactics to meet their goals. What was done here was not a hijack. So the hijackers were not hijacking um, to impersonate the DNS servers. They actually impersonated the Amazon DNS servers. So when there was a DNS request to translate the domain address to the cryptocurrency IP, what happened was that the people were given an IP address to a false platform where the users were input their login information, and the cryptocurrency was stolen from them. So here we have a fraud engineering that uses several internet levels and several vulnerabilities that fall in those layers in order to meet their malicious intents. And I think that you were talking about encryption and the importance of encryption in your previous session. And we say, okay, well, we have encryption in our apps, so we're secure. But there is always a possible weakest link that will might be an open door for attackers to create these frauds or to carry out their malicious actions. And there are many other cases where, due to configuration mistakes, certain routes are created that redirect traffic in an incorrect way, and that, of course, degrades the service for the end user. And I would say that most cases fall under the category where the internet service ends up not going at the speed in which it should or doesn't lead to where it should. And they can be very quickly solved because there are config issues, but still they're a problem. Um, and so beyond the cases that are really famous or infamous, where a particular service falls or people cannot access it, what I would say is that generally speaking, there are very minor, in between inverted commas, incidents that continue to happen every single day. And here you can see a chart for the past 3 years with a number of routing incidents per year. If you can see over here in 2017, there were 2,848 leaks and over 2,400 hijacks, and that slowly reduced all the way to 2019, where we had over 2,296 leaks and almost 1,100 hijacks. And as you can see, the number of incidents per year are not that many, but if you divide this per 365 days of the year, I mean, you get more than one incident per year. But even if it's not pronounced, we still seem to see that we are getting less incidents per year, possibly thanks to initiatives such as MANRS that are being helpful. Because even if the number of incidents is not significantly reduced, day by day we have more autonomous systems that are registered and connected to the internet. So if we have more stakeholders participating, we should have more incidents. But it is interesting to see that the opposite is happening. Now, about incidents in Latin American countries, I will talk about it, but I do think we need to think about the fact that when we talk about incidents happening in autonomous systems in a particular country, we do need to think about the number of autonomous systems that that country has. Because if we talk about United States that get to the highest point, or Brazil, who is in the middle, they have the most incidents, but at the same time, they have the most registered autonomous systems. So it does make sense for them to have more incidents than other countries in the region. And now, just going back to hard data here, with regards to routing incidents in Latin America, we have figures here for 2017 and 2018, and these are divided into leaks and hijacks. And you can imagine that per incident, an autonomous system can be involved in two ways. They can either be victims, that is the autonomous system who is the legitimate owner of a prefix or an IP, and the person, and then there's someone who is responsible, an autonomous system who is responsible for the attack, who is announcing that IP that belongs to the victim by mistake or because they have malicious intent. So here you can see the data. And what I think is interesting, and I want you to take notice of this, is that Brazil has the most incidents. But as I was telling you, they have many more autonomous systems than the rest of the countries in the region. Then, if we want to compare this in a more realistic way, I do want to share these last two graphs with you. Here, what I do is I take out that bias of the size of the country, and given the number of incidents, routing incidents per country, uh, I divide that per the number of autonomous systems. Whether or not the autonomous system is a victim or is responsible for the incident. So here in the vertical axis, you can see when the country had autonomous systems that were victims to an incident. So in the horizontal axis, you can see the number of autonomous systems in that country that were responsible for a routing incident in 2017. So the thing is that those countries that are closer to the origin are those that are better positioned. And as you can see, here I went for WW, which is the world, the United States as a reference point. And as you can see, most countries are in the median, some are better than the median. And the important thing here that is interesting is that when we move to 2018, most countries are moving towards the center. So that indicates that we're having less and less routing incidents in autonomous systems per country and per autonomous system, which is really particularly interesting for us. And perhaps we shouldn't rush into conclusions, but the work that MANRS is doing, I think, has been very significant in the reduction of routing incidents. And not to go over time, I would want to pose the question of how to reduce routing incidents. And basically, I think it's really complex to reduce the number of incidents because the BGP protocol was not considered or created with security in mind, and implementing it nowadays takes a lot of work. And in general, as it just so happens with many of the issues that we have on the internet, this network effect or this dilemma is created based on collective actions. Network operators can implement measures in order to ensure and secure routing, which are the measures, for example, and the norms that are promoted by MANRS. But if they are only promoted and implemented by one operator, then there is no impact. In order to have an impact, most of the operators actually need to implement them. So there's this dichotomy of whether I should wait until everyone else implements them, because if not, it doesn't make sense, or whether I should start and kick this off. So I think that's the most important thing about MANRS, because MANRS is advocating in order for network operators to engage in these actions. And now, after that, I think it is time for Leah to explain a bit more in detail about the MANRS programs and to tell you a bit of what is being done in order to reduce the number of incidents. And that was it for
Gracias,
me.
Augusto. Y sí, precisamente creo
Thank
que,
you, Augusto.
sabes que a mí me gusta mucho de los análisis
Something I really like
que se
about
hacen
the analysis
y
that you are
precisamente
conducting
que no solamente se queda en un tema
is that
de
it's not
identificación de
just
los
about
temas,
pointing
sino,
out
sino
routing incidents with regards to something
sí,
that is connected to the way in which internet works, but
consecuencias
also
para las
you
personas
discuss the consequences that has for end
Jorge
users.
Oscar Benetti
I think Jorge Oscar Benetti was asking here, what is the perspective that you perceive with the arrival of AI in order to hijack either encryption or internet routes? Well, I think this has more to do with encryption. I mean, of course, we depend on encryption with public key infrastructures and symmetric keys structures that will probably think that will be done either with AI or quantum computing, that it might be able to break that encryption, and that will cause troubles, of course. And as a matter of fact, routing security using RPKI, which is what is being used right now to secure BGP, also depends on encryption. So this security is based on the foundations of encryption. So I mean, it is critical in that sense. I don't know if there is a part of the question that I didn't
No, me
answer.
parece que sí, porque
No, I think
ajá,
that
yo
that's
creo
the
que con
answer.
tu
I mean,
pregunta
Eduardo
lograste
Tomé was
como
also asking
especificar
about the economical
cómo
impact of these
realmente son,
incidents,
bueno,
how
varias
common
cosas,
they
¿no?
are,
Este,
because they seem
en
to be too
presentaciones que hemos dado
complex.
decimos,
And in many of the
un trabajo
presentations,
de
we
identificación
say
y un
that
trabajo
the
atrás,
routing system
porque
is under attack
siempre este tipo de incidentes no
because these
solo
incidents
son
are always
en
happening.
esa línea
They don't
de
always imply having big brands
comunicación, pero
or
sí
big
pueden ser muy,
corporations
muy
offline,
útil. Augusto,
but
no
they are
sé
really
si
common.
has
Augusto,
encontrado
in
como
your research, have you
similitudes, no
come
sé,
across any
incidentes que
numbers
se den con
that connect
sectores
to
económicos.
these incidents to economical consequences? There is a report conducted for the World Economic Forum that estimates a couple of numbers, but with regards to general cybersecurity incidents, not specifically with regards to routing incidents, because I think it's really hard to estimate that too. Because many a times what happens is that, okay, you lose connectivity to a part of the internet, that is, an ISP loses connectivity with part of the internet. So you have employees who need to troubleshoot that, try to find what the issue is with the routing of that router, and find out what's not working. And I mean, the ISP loses time. The employees, of course, are going through a very hard time, but it's really difficult to quantify that in financial terms. So in that sense, I think that that's the easiest thing that we can see with regards to ISP operations, right? And whether or not they're losing money. And then obviously, if a service is rendered not connected, I mean, the costs are really high. I mean, if you are out of access because of a routing incident, then you should think about how much money you're losing per minute if your server is down. But that is information that is hard to measure too. And like I said, there is this report of the World Economic Forum. It's general, but it might be a good starting point to discuss this. I'll look for the number for that to share it with you. But I don't remember it by heart. I'm sorry.
Pregunta también Elizabeth Guerrero.
Yes, and then Elizabeth Guerrero was also
Es que la verdad,
asking,
todos los sistemas
because you were
autónomos
saying
actualmente
that
tienen,
all the autonomous systems that
la tendencia global es a
are the
tener
part of the
pocos
internet
accidentes, pero sí
are
hay
actually
mayor incidencia.
reporting
Bueno,
less
creo que eso también pasa
incidents,
como en
but
regiones
Brazil had more
específicas,
actually. But I think
más
that that might
fuertes
have
en
something to
regiones
do with specific regions,
específicas,
right? Regardless of the fact that there's a global trend,
también depende de
there
la
might
población.
be a country where the number of incidents rises, right? Yes, of course. And I think that that really depends as well um, on whether or not we're considering those incidents where those autonomous systems were victims and they had their prefix hijacked or leaked, or whether they acted as attackers. And in Brazil, when you check the statistics, the number of autonomous systems keeps rising day by day. So, I mean, Brazil, the market in Brazil is huge. So it can happen for this to grow exponentially faster, I think. But in the last couple of years and in the last analysis, I did not check 2020 though, but the number of incidents in Brazil was a number of incidents was going down actually.
Tenemos una pregunta de un
Yes, and there's another question by an anonymous participant who says, "Are there any statistics about routing attacks in Latin America?" Augusto, if you can copy the link uh, for the um, for the study published by Fort there in the chat. Yes, I actually worked as a consultant for the LACNIC project. You can get into fortproject.net. And you will be able to download the report that I carried out based on 2017, 2018, and part of 2019. And I will be sharing that with you there in the chat. You can go in there and download the report if you want. And we also have the BGP stream site that collects all routing incidents, and you can also over there see. Okay, I that is the English link that I shared with you there in the chat. I will send the one in Spanish though, and like I said, you have information on general incidents there, but you also know the number of incidents that are constantly happening. And of course, you also have the MANRS Observatory that has very interesting information for you too. Yes, absolutely, and it's such a good thing for you to say that because now Leah will be talking more about that. Thank you, Augusto, for your participation, for your time, and for your constant active collaboration with Manners. Julio says, "What happens with the ISPs that malintentionally send out traffic somewhere else?" Well, like we've said, we've seen that there are incidents of different natures. Sometimes it's a matter of issues with configuration. Sometimes we have malicious incidents, which is why we are promoting to have more stakeholders use manners, because the more actors engage in manners, the more secure our routing will be. So, having said that, I want to give the floor to Leah. She is a manners fellow in the training track, but she is also very active in the Bolivian chapter. She participates in several projects at the local level, and she is continuously participating in the network operators community of Latin America and the Caribbean in LACNOG. So, another brilliant guest for today. That's Leah, who will talk about manner actions.
Bueno, muy buenas tardes. Pues bueno, en esta
Hi, good afternoon and or morning, depending on where you are.
oportunidad yo voy a hablar de lo
Today,
que
I
es
will be talking about the manners programs
¿no?
for
Acá
different
tenemos buenas y
audiences,
malas noticias. Acá tenemos
because it's not just about bad
¿no?
news. So
Tenemos
here I have
buenas
something
noticias, perdón,
to
la
present because we
reducción
have manners
y
for
precisamente
everything,
en este
everyone,
programa
and
como lo
everywhere.
mencionaron
And I will also be answering some of the questions that were
¿no?
just
La
mentioned there in the
primera
chat.
iniciativa que tenemos
The
es
first initiative that we
manners
have
for
is manners
operators.
for network operators.
Son son cuatro pasos
So
simples que
this just implies
realizamos
four
alrededor
simple
de
steps that can
inicialmente
help
vamos a iniciar la página.
ISPs to
Luego
join the
vamos a
Manners
dar,
Initiative.
se refieren a la
To
página,
refer to the
y ya
technical
luego
operational aspect, and
¿no?
two
Las
of them are more
la
about
primera que vamos a
coordination.
mencionar es
So the
la
first
primera que es
action
la
has to
filtración,
do
que
with
sería
filtering. That
la
means
detección de posibles
preventing
anuncios que
the
realizan anunciantes
propagation of
de
incorrect
sitios
routing information. So we are
web
securing
adyacentes.
that their
Estos
announcements
filtrados
to
especifican
clients
minuciosos datos críticos que
are
deben ser filtrados.
exact.
Cabe
So that
mencionar
means
que
that they
para
need to
esto
be very
se
thoroughly
espera
minding the
que estemos
prefixes that will be
en
published.
acuerdo
And of course, we need to consider that BGP is implies this honor code. In internet, we talk about the BGP honor code. So when an operator is using BGP and routing using that protocol for other operators, they are trusting each other. They're trusting that what's coming from other operators is valid too. So we need to be mindful of those things that we are publishing, those things that we are receiving and then sharing. So this action focuses on that, on minding the filtering of the content that we are receiving. And the second action, which is technical, that implies the habilitation and validation systems for prefixes origins. This means that it's necessary to work on edge routers. So when an organization wants to connect to another through the autonomous systems, they use specific hardware for that. So we need to have different validation techniques and methods to make sure that we can validate that what we're receiving belongs to who is saying that owns those resources. Then the third action is a coordination action. It is important for us to have content information that is updated and available at a global level in databases. And this task helps us, for example, solve incidents that we have. Imagine that we have a provider that has detected, as Augusto was saying, and remember, it's hard to detect these problems. So, in that time when the provider is trying to detect the issue, they probably, I don't know, had complaints from end users or lost revenue. So, it is important then to solve those problems as soon as possible and solve those incidents. I mean, the time in which that service is available is money, right? So what the provider does is they try to contact someone. They've found out that there's a problem. They've done the hard thing. They've seen where the problem lies. So they are able to use a database where they can find contact information for that organization that participates in the incident, communicate to them, and try to solve that incident as soon as possible. Which is why it's so important to have an up-to-date database with valid information. And then the fourth action for network operators has to do with publishing all their data so that other people can validate that. So that means that I will have my prefixes, my organization prefixes, published in a repository, and everyone can validate that that actually belongs to me. And again, we go back to that honor code. We believe in what is coming from that operator because internet was conceived like that. Internet was conceived for communication, for interconnection between people. I mean, imagine if you are university, right? And internet was being created and there was this party and people celebrated because the first interconnection was conducted. So imagine what happens now when we are all interconnected and sending data throughout the network. So it's important for us to validate that that information that is being published belongs to that organization, and we need to do that in a quick, reliable way. And that's what the fourth action is about. So far, we have 487 participants at the level of operators who participate in the MANRS initiative, and about all the way up to 4 months ago, we started massively sharing what MANRS was about with policymakers. So we had 469, now we have 487 operators who have signed in to MANRS. So that goes to show that when you, as chapter leaders, and as members of ISOC chapters, when you start talking about MANRS with operators or with banks or with university, they will perfectly understand what you mean because this community is definitely growing. Now, there's a second program, which is the IXP program. Now, this program, I would say, is rather new. We started this in 2018, and a long time has gone since then. But still, it's rather new. We started with 12 participant IXPs, and it focuses on having within an IXP a society, if you will. In an IXP, we have a society of ISPs. And that's a key point for us to work with them, for us to create a safe neighborhood, if you will, among those ISPs. So we use IXPs to create safe neighborhoods and trust bubbles, if you will. So we want to leverage the fact that all these operators who are using that IXP feel the same way about security. So it is important for MANRS to work with IXPs, and that is why we have specific actions for IXPs. And the actions that we have are super simple. The first two are mandatory and the other three are optional. The first one is about filtering, and like we said, they need to very thoroughly mind the prefixes that they're publishing. So what happens over here, and this is a best practice for IXPs, is that they use route servers. What we mean by doing that is that they are able to control the filtering, control what is being published and what isn't, and if someone wants to participate in an IXP, it becomes easier. So for filtering, it is important to use routing servers. And in order to do that, there are many organizations that are collaborating, and Internet Society is one of the organizations that does that. The second thing the IXP needs to do, and this is mandatory, is to promote manners. And how can it be so simple? I mean, everyone can promote manners if they know what it's like. But like I said, it's a super simple thing to do. And in order to promote manners, we can find four specific options in the manners manuals. So A is helping with record keeping, helping with the implementation of operator actions, then a membership guide to manners, or incentives to prepare manners. And because I work with the Fellows Program for Manners, we offer our training to IXPs. And we are right now carrying out trainings with a collaboration, with a very significant collaboration of LAC IX, where close to 29 network operators from IXPs are participating. So in our following session with them, we'll be specifically focused on their organization and on the ISPs that they're participating there, and in that way they will be able to meet the second action for the manner certification. So there is help for you. So if within your chapters you want to promote manners and IXPs, know for sure that we are willing to collaborate with you and help in the second action. Now, in the third point, and it's not mandatory, is to protect the peering platform. The IXP needs to have policies published that indicate what traffic is not permitted among the peers. And then for the fourth action, it is important to have global communication with all members of the IXPs. They need to have mailing lists. They need to have communication and distribution groups. The important thing is for them to communicate. And as you can see, none of this is really complex. I mean, it's easy to do this. And then lastly, it is necessary to have looking glass tools that allow for monitoring and debugging, and to have a general overview of the exchange point. And there are many, many providers who actually have this. And these five actions are already being complied by several operators. So the only thing that they need to do is sign in the Manners initiative to be a part of a safe community. So far, we have 59 participants in Manners for IXPs. And if we go back 4 months ago, we had 48 participants. So participation continues to grow. So we hope the LAC region will be ready to continue increasing these numbers. As a matter of fact, Panama and Dominican Republic are getting quite close to registering and joining in the initiative. Now, about the third Manners program, it is a program for CDNs and cloud servers. So far, 4 months ago, we had 12 participants. Now we have 14. And I think that the nice thing about belonging to the Manners community is that all of these organizations share their good practices. They collaborate and they discuss what their issues might have been or any mistakes that they've made. And let me tell you an anecdote about this. About a week ago, I was contacted by a content provider to start working together. And he asked, okay, do you have RPKI? Do you have IRR registries? And I felt super happy about that because that means organizations are already talking about manners and secure routing. And I said, yes, I mean, I have secure routing. And then he said, okay, then we can start working together. So be sure that all of these initiatives are spreading at the level of clients, providers. Now, if we go to the Manners Observatory, what happens is that if I am an organization, I sign into Manners, I can put the Manners stamp in my website, and I can go above and beyond so that everyone knows that I am observing manners. But the Manners Observatory gives me an overview about the deployment of the Manners Initiative at a global level. So it is useful for me, and I can even filter this at the regional level. Here you have some images of the very user-friendly observatory. And in the observatory, we can also see the different advancements that we can use to certify our organizations in manners. In the Manners Observatory uses different resources to feed the reports. So you are actually willingly and transparently providing data for the observatory, and it is important that that you know that you don't need to install a Manners client in your network. The observatory uses public access, public free access sources. And here, for example, you can see how data is being collected by the Manners Observatory. Um, it is, of course, built in modules in order to guarantee high availability. And the Manners Observatory has two points of view. One is public, so you can actually access that right now, and you can have a general overview of internet security, number of incidents, and so on and so forth. And as an incentive for joining Manners, you do have a private view. If you join in Manners as an organization and you meet the different actions, her connection is down, and it was she stopped talking. Okay, she went back. So, what is useful about the Manners Observatory? Well, first of all, we are able to monitor how we're doing with the initiative, how we're implementing actions. We're able to see how companies can implement routing security. Manners promotes social responsibility because this implementation is not disruptive in the networks, but it still promotes security. And it's also a useful tool for governments to create incentivizing public policies to implement routing security. So, globally, what this allows us to do is to have a tool that enables us to make better decisions at the level of the organization. And now, Internet Society has actually conducted research about routing security, and we will go very, very quickly about this. There were 451 organizations that participated in the research. There were clients who participated, organizations. And that's the nice thing about Internet Society, that we are able to look at all the different approaches. We can see end users, we can see academia, we can be seeing ISPs. And generally speaking, what we were able to learn was that the knowledge about what manners is rather low. People don't really know manners with regards to routing security, but there is a very high interest among organizations to know more about routing security. Apart from that, companies have said that they are willing to demand the compliance with manners to their ISPs. On the other hand, manners definitely adds value to ISPs. taking into account that those ISPs uh, belong to this flat market. If you set up a 5G service, someone else will do it, and so on and so forth. So the growth of an ISP, goes along with the development of technology. So the thing that might differentiate that ISP and set it apart from all others is the offer of security to end users. So why should ISPs join MANRS then? As we've already said, it's because it provides them with this distinction of having security. On the other hand, we have a company, imagine, or an organization or a client that investing a lot in security. The ISP will help that client make that organization even more secure. They won't be the weak link for that client. Then why should companies demand manners be implemented? Well, for that, I'm going to share two examples. One is banking. Uh, Banking invests a lot in security at the level of firewalls or internal level in general. But what would happen if their ISPs undergoes route hijacking? I mean, imagine they would lose the service, they're losing revenue. So implementing manners and demanding manners would allow them to reach higher levels in the industry by demanding their ISPs to secure the routing, because it's not something that depends on them, but it's something that they can demand. Another example can be a university, right? Throughout the pandemic, online education has become paramount. But imagine if you're a group of students who are taking a test, and then all of a sudden you lose connectivity because your ISP uh, just underwent route hijacking or any other routing incident that was mentioned by Agustin. So what would happen then is that the end user would be affected. So at the end user level, if the end user and the organization knows about manners, they can ask through legal tenders for their ISPs to provide an assurance that they are doing something about routing security. And then on another note, why should governments promote manners? Well, governments should promote manners because it is important to talk about security among end users and raise awareness about the importance of having secure routing. Governments should also lead by example. Organizations within the government and government agencies can implement manners and become an example for the community. Another factor to consider, or another relevant stakeholder for manners, is definitely academia and networks of research and education. So they can show that they are leaders in technology. You know that most of the advancements in technology come from academia, so that's important. It can also add competitive value and improve operational efficacy. And for example, operators can solve problems better, and then they can also become role models in how to solve those incidents. And over here, you have a bit more information about manners, about the observatory. So please, I welcome you and I encourage you to continue spreading and advocating for manners inside your chapters and among the organizations that are your allies and trust your equipments. I mean, implementing manners are basically cooking recipes. It's just a checklist. It's something very simple that can be done. It's practically a recipe, and many organizations that have autonomous systems are implementing that. Simply work on that, work on the checklist, and you can proudly publish your manners logo in your website. I think that's it for me, right?
Gracias. De hecho,
I think that's it.
justamente resaltaste varios puntos que son interesantes
Yes,
también.
I think you were able to highlight a couple of points that were really interesting for us to wrap up the session. But before that, I do want to take a moment because Jaime really asked an interesting question, but particularly this question by Jaime Cabrera
tema
can lead to
importante, porque él nos
an
pide que
important
hagamos esta
discussion
prueba
because he was
de
asking if,
actividad
in order to use
y
RPKI in his
él sabe que
university,
tener un
his
programa como
ISP
esto
needs to have implemented
yo sé que
manners.
ustedes han trabajado
And Leah,
bastante
I
con
think you've
operadores
worked a
muy
lot
conocidos,
with
particularmente
operators who are in similar
en
cases. We've
universidades
particularly been working with
de la región.
universities in the
Así
region.
que
So
igual si nos ayudas con esa
if
respuesta,
you can help
igual
us with
quisiera yo
that.
adelantar
And I also saw that there's a
nuestros
hand up
participantes.
amongst the
Si nos ayudan a
participants.
pregunta aquí en la
If you
cámara
want
de
to ask the
participantes
question over here in the
para
Q&A
que
box,
respondamos. Si
please go
quieren
ahead.
participar,
If you
igual
want
estamos
to participate, let me
para
know so
agradecerles.
I can measure the time of the session.
Bueno, en respuesta a la consulta, efectivamente hemos estado trabajando
To
con
answer your
una
question, yes,
organización de varias
we have been
universidades
working with
¿no?
a coalition of
Y hemos tenido
universities,
varios escenarios, ¿no?
and
Estas
several
universidades
scenarios have come up.
un aprendizaje muy grande
This has been an amazing learning
en
process
realidad,
for us
porque existen universidades que
because
realmente
there are
no
several
tienen autonomía
universities that don't
independiente
have
y
autonomous systems.
ahí
They depend on their
pues pueden
ISPs,
pedir a su proveedor
and
que
that's an
para
important
ello.
step,
Por
right?
otro
You
lado,
can
hay
ask your
otras
providers to implement
universidades que
RPKI.
tienen sistema
There
autónomo
are,
y que tienen
however,
acceso a
universities
sus
that have
proveedores, ¿no?
autonomous systems
Entonces,
and they
ellos
actually
tienen
have
un sistema de
um,
trabajo que
their own
confeccionan,
autonomous
pueden
systems with numeric resources,
generar sus certificados,
and they can create their own
hacer
certificates.
validaciones,
They can validate
pero solamente lo pueden
RPKI,
llevar con sus proveedores.
and those universities
Es
that
importante
don't
pues para la
can ask
organización
that of their ISPs. It is important, of course, to have the RPKI in an autonomous system,
recursos
and also to
necesarios.
own those numeric resources created by it.
Perdón,
I'm sorry, I am done, but I think I haven't answered. It appears that Israel lost connection. No one is speaking right now. Hi, can you hear me?
Esto estuvo muy raro, no sé qué pasó.
Oh, that was weird. I don't know what happened. Leah froze. I left. We're now both here. I don't know what happened with the connection. Something weird happened. I am so sorry for that. You know that technology really does whatever it wants with us, right? What I was saying is that we're not asking you to validate our PKI, but you do need to have the signed ROA. We have been working a lot with the people from LACNIC
atender estas
in order
necesidades
to deal with these needs to sign the
y bueno, ahorita veo
ROAs.
también que Patricia nos está
And I
pidiendo
see that
justo
Patricia over there is asking what we could ask the ISP to ensure that they comply with manners. And if you go to the chat, you can actually see the implementation guide.
escritas a detalle
And
con
over there, you can
especificaciones
have
para
the
su presentación
detailed
para operadores de
list
redes.
of the actions
Igual
for
Patricia,
network
si
operators. But
quieres
Patricia,
conocimiento más
if
profundizado,
you want
puedes
a more
escribir a nuestro correo
personalized work, you can write
isocc
to me,
y
Rosas at
le hacemos
ISOC.org,
el
and we
training
can check that together, either with the training team
etcétera.
or the MANRS team, in order
Algo
to
que
provide more
quisiera
concrete help for
para
you.
retomar son las últimas
Something
diapositivas
that I want to go back
que
to
compartí.
are the
Te
last slides of
comentaré
Leah's presentation because
algunas de las
I think we understand that several people over here are actually technicians, right? They're working on network operation, or they have worked in network operation before. But we also understand that many of the people who are here today are experts in other fields, such as public policies, spectrum management. I mean, we've had brilliant participations from our chapter members, and sometimes when we start talking about topics that are more connected to network operations might be a bit different from what you are used to doing. And something that we really like highlighting out is that from your chapters, you can do a lot of things to promote manners, and it is not necessary for you to be part of the technical teams who work with the organizations. Here, for example, what we saw that in the slides that Leo was sharing is that depending on the stakeholder that we are talking to, we can show them a specific part of the project. Many a times, what is useful for us is to approach those contacts that we have, even if they don't belong to technical teams, and tell them about the fact that we have a program that by implementing some technical things improves the security of the internet and decreases the number of routing incidents. And that could be anyone from public policymakers, operators of commercial networks. And that's because there are many times when we talk about technical operators in the ISPs, they understand what we mean, but many times if we talk to public policymakers, they really don't understand what's the good thing about implementing these initiatives. So we should highlight that manners is not going to create additional costs, because no one needs to pay for a training, no one needs to pay for a specialized certification that needs to be renewed each year. What we are looking for is for the implementation of best practices based on standards that are already out there, independently of whomever was that manufactured the equipment in that network. This is cross-cutting for all manufacturers, actually, and the only thing that you need is for that interested party, that interested organization already has an autonomous system number and already have IP addresses and prefixes assigned. So participation in manners is free and it's voluntary. And what we've been able to see with several IXPs and NRENs is that because there are several local stakeholders involved there, they become a natural point for the implementation of those actions. Pablo Ruiz asks if IPv6 is included. Yes, this is independent from the protocol version that is being used. This is fully transparent for IPv6. And really, we encourage you to, if you know of someone that you can work with, but you don't know the technical aspects of it, don't worry. We are here to support you in the manners team. So if you don't remember someone's specific email, you can write manners@isoc.org and we will answer ASAP. We will provide guidance and all the information and resources that you need to convince someone of joining in manners. We can provide trainings as well. As Leo was saying, we've actually provided help to several organizations. And Carlos was saying, how does this complement the work that we do from Internet Society with those of LACNIC? And for example, we've provided trainings along with LACNIC. We offered help in a session with a Fort validator for RPKI that was conducted by LACNIC and NIC Mexico. We're constantly providing trainings. Asael over there actually shared a link for the deployment of IPv6. And what we've seen is that the technical community in Latin America and the Caribbean tend to work together in order to promote these deployments. And what we've done with LAC-IX and with LACNIC actually is help deploy those IXPs. That's what we were talking about on Tuesday with the case of Dominican Republic and Guatemala. We've also been working tirelessly in other countries such as Bolivia. And in those IXPs, we are promoting for them to be ready once the deployment is done, for them to implement the MANRS actions for IXPs. And that's what we generally do. First, we promote information, we facilitate those trainings, and if any of you are part of the technical operation teams and wants to promote this project inside of your organizations, you can do that. Just go to manners.org. There is a resources section. You have summaries, presentations, general information that you can use without us having to participate. If you want us to join in, we will definitely join in, of course. But this is mostly focused on the community. This is a program that is made up of voluntary actions. So if you have any more questions, any more comments, you have our emails over there. You can answer, you can write and we will answer to rosas at isoc.org or manners at isoc.org. I want to thank Leah, Augusto for their participation in this session. I think that there were several points that you guys covered. I also want to thank all of you who participated here in Zoom, all of you who joined in the live stream or in Facebook. And do remember that every single day, these sessions are being recorded and they're being broadcast in English and in Spanish through our website. In Facebook, you can find us in ISOC Latin America and Caribbean. We have Sun Limits Interpretation, who we thank for her work. And once again, I do invite you not to miss out the next activities that we will have in this Latin American chapters workshop. We are close to finishing this week. Everything is going in a blur. I mean, we've having sessions about different projects. We talked about encryption. We talked about routing security. So please don't miss out on the next session that we have in 45 minutes. Do remember that we have a WhatsApp group as well where you can find the reminders, the agenda for the day. Over there, you can know which of the sessions that we have per day and what times they're on. And I do invite you and encourage you to join us in our next session at 7 p.m. UTC. And then our third VUCA environment session in our last night. And then remember, the session is open so that you don't have to go in and out. So take these next 45 minutes to get a cup of coffee, to have some water, stretch your legs. And do remember, it is really good to get up of that chair, stretch a bit, and move your bodies around. And please stay tuned to the activities of this week's workshop. Do remember, you can follow us on Twitter in ISOC_LAC and with the hashtag ISOC Virtual. My name is Israel Rojas, and I'll see you soon.